Michael Weng, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Robby. Thanks a lot. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure having you here. We go back a few years now.
Yeah, exactly. Met in Copenhagen at a conference and it just kind of ran from there.
Yeah, an industrial security conference to be exact.
Exactly.
Which we've been at for 3 years now together. So that's good. And and I'm sure as many others that we know, would consider you the friendly neighborhood OT guy in our security world.
Yeah, I think that they used to refer to me as a furniture on that conference because I'm one of the few guys who've been there from the beginning. So yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
OT, ICS, cybersecurity. We protect society.
Yep. So OT, so industrial control systems. Yeah, big machines that make lots of noise and are very critical for us, I guess. That's your specialty.
Exactly.
Are you one of those that was an engineer and then, moved over to security world
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
that? Or yeah?
I started off as an actually electronics engineer. For some reason, ended up in IT. Got a gig designing a backbone infrastructure for a manufacturing plant somewhere, and then it kind of took off. Got more and more into the OT stuff. Found it more and more interesting. Worked from there. Spent like almost 20 years in the pharmaceutical business, designing, building, testing, validating, and then slowly ventured into cybersecurity. Then came 2010 and the famous Stuxnet incident, and that kind of spawned the old hacker dream. And I took that career shift, and now it's all about OT, ICS, cybersecurity.
Cool. So today I'd like to talk to you about keeping the lights on. And I'm sure you're following what's going on in Ukraine. It's very, very sad. Obviously, I think we all agree on that. And, obviously they're using physical means of taking down the power grid right now. But they have, as far as I know, also tried to do the same through digital means before. And it seems that it didn't work out as well.
Well, I think, first of all, yes, our hearts is with Ukraine, of course. It's a horrible thing going on so close. And yes, I think as many other of the community, is a little bit surprised that we haven't seen more effort actually and more results from the cyber warfare part of the conflict, because we definitely all thought that would be the case at this time. I think when the military exercise was initiated back in February, there was a huge pressure, especially on the Ukrainians on the cyber side. And we all expected that of course would venture into at least Western Europe, because we were all pushing back, making all kinds of initiatives. So we kind of started to anticipate more Russian cyber warfare, all kinds of crime gangs teaming up with the Russians in Russia, outside of Russia. But it, funny enough, hasn't really turned out to be that big a success. And now they're obviously relying on kinetic warfare to kill the critical infrastructure, which is obviously working. A lot of people without electricity and heat and gas. So, and for wintertime, that's not good. But yeah, we haven't seen as much cyber as we thought we would.
What have we seen? Because I know there has been, some hermetic wiper. There are a few things that have been deployed and have had an effect, or maybe not had an effect, but they were at least they tried using it. Correct? What have we seen?
Exactly. And it's an ongoing discussion whether there is a raised threat level here. But what we are basically seeing, at least when we are looking at the public available intelligence, is that there's a lot of scanning going on, but not necessarily that many targeted attack on the OT/ICS side or the critical infrastructure. But yes, luckily the Destroyer 2 was found before it was detonated and actually used in the wild, and that turned out to be a bit of an wake-up call, I think, for the community also, because we are now seeing that they're, yes, including Viber and kill disk capabilities into their malware, and it's much more modular. So there's an expectation to this kind of malware being the new stuff, and it seems to be a lot more targeted against OT, and not only having capability to do lateral movement and penetrating the actual OT stuff, but it's also carrying supposedly some seriously consequences for this type of equipment. So I'm hoping we're not going to see anything, but unfortunately, if this intention is really something they're building, then I think we need to be especially careful and do a lot more of situational awareness, meaning that we need to be, or the company needs to be a lot better at monitoring and have that visibility into their daily operations in their networks, because they need to detect this very early to be able to protect themselves.
Is it, you mentioned Stuxnet earlier, is it still so that attacks that end up having an effect on an OT system, industrial control systems, that they still come through IT? Like the IT side of business?
I think most of what we see is either coming as a collateral damage from IT. Most of the ransomware attacks are supposedly, again, the public intelligence that we have, threat intel, points to the fact that it's IT ransomware more than OT targeted ransomware. We see remote access issues. The Oldsmar water case was a TeamViewer thing. So remote access, and sometimes even vendors coming in doing maintenance with their laptops, and then kind of a supply chain attack because then they have infected laptops. But again, it's primarily seen as being IT malware. So we don't really. I mean, there are a few cases in the gray zone after the two well-known cases from Christmas 2015 and 16, by the way, also in Ukraine. So after that, we haven't really seen much. The Tracis Hetman incident, of course, but besides that, mainly IT.
Yeah. So you named, supply chain, I heard, third-party vendors, needing access to things. What are some of the trends in the OT security space that you see? If you had to list a few.
Well, we definitely see that more people are becoming aware of this visibility need, and so they're implementing all kinds of NSM boxes or NMS boxes, network monitoring, security monitoring capabilities. You would have your Dragos, your Nozomi, your Clarity boxes, Forescout or SCADAfence, just to mention the top tier ones, and we're also seeing more and more companies actually making some form of due diligence, trying to do risk assessment and point out the crown jewels or the critical parts of the production, doing some form of risk assessment to actually try to balance the cyber effort, the cybersecurity efforts. So I think that's a new thing, even though we in the community would like to see them do more. Some are struggling getting even the basics right still. So I also think that we're seeing, at least we're being challenged more and more on incident response readiness. So we're doing more tabletop exercises where we include the OT part. If it's a manufacturing company or a critical infrastructure energy company, we're tasked with also including doing injects for the OT side to kind of test these incident response plans and for the companies to see if the business continuity is in place.
And what is your, how has your experience been with those initial, sort of projects?
Well, it's good so far. It's definitely still wake-up calls for the companies. Some of them actually have quite good incident response plan on the business side, on the IT, corporate IT, enterprise side, and they would have a fairly good sense of what to do and who should do it and when and who to call. But then if it starts to move into the OT side, then it becomes more blurry, and often enough there's this challenge between how they do it in IT and then what you can actually do in OT, because there are different priorities. So that's often where we see that they're a bit more challenged, and there's There's still a lack of good playbooks on the OT side, I would say. Most of them just aiming at being able to respond to standard ransomware attacks.
What are some of the common challenges that you see moving forward then within performing these tests and these assessments? Because I would assume that the OT side of business they do have incident response plans, but they are more for like when the power goes out or when their system stops working. So it's not like they're starting from scratch. Or
exactly. Well, they have been focusing, of course, on safety and resilience because this is often enough where the money is earned. So, and there's also often enough life at stakes. Things can go boom or make huge environmental disasters. We've seen a couple of those as well. So I think the emphasis has been on safety and resilience, and now they're slowly starting to include cyber into this because, of course, a ransomware attack could mean, whether it's from IT or targeted OT, it still means that you will lose visibility and you might even lose control over the process. And that can have a huge consequence, not only for the people working at the site, but if you're at the wrong geographical point of view, it can hit environment severely, or if it's in the middle of a town, there's a huge potential for a lot of other people to be impacted. So they're slowly starting to address this. So they have to shift their focus a little bit from standard safety and resilience issues to more cybersecurity driven approaches. So there's still room for improvement there, but we're seeing more and more, so that's a good thing. And then, of course, there's the standard challenge that since this equipment is a little bit different than standard IT. At least we're not aiming at doing pen test in the OT side. It's an ongoing discussion also in this community whether you can do a pen test. But depending on the definition, we are doing assessments. So try to be as passive as possible and try to assess at least what controls are in place, is the basic cybersecurity framework in place, the governance around it, and then see if there's room for improvement on the basics, and then slowly venture into parts, and then maybe advising the clients to build a virtual lab resembling some of the process equipment, or at least the IT parts of the process equipment, having some of the OT applications run in there, and then you can do a kind of a simulated pen test directly on that, but without the impact of the actual running equipment, and that's one of the main challenges. But it takes a lot of effort, and of course it's competing priorities to few people running operations, so that's still the challenge.
Yeah. For those of us that are listening that don't have anything to do with these big systems that make lots of noise, right, and the security of them, should we be worried, or aren't there are some new regulations coming that are going to make this a lot of the things you're mentioning, like network monitoring, tests, incident response procedures and stuff. That's going to come, right? People or companies that are involved with this will eventually be at a certain maturity level in Europe.
Definitely, and I can hear that you're referring to NIS2 directive, and it's definitely gonna be something that will raise the bar for many companies, especially small, mid-size, maybe mostly mid-size. I think most of the big companies are fairly good at protecting their environments, although there is always room for improvements. But I think, we will. I don't think we need to be worried, but we need to do due diligence. I also think that policymakers, governments need to step up because a lot of this is part of the critical national infrastructure, and not only the telecommunication and the financial part, but heating and gas for cooking and heating and electricity. I mean, that's what's going to carry society these days, especially here in Denmark, where I reside. We have one of the most digitized countries in the world and societies. So we need to step up and help improve the digital part of our society. And as long as we take that challenge, I don't think we have to be kind of worried, but there is definitely a room for improvement still.
Going back to Ukraine, they were able to get their power back on despite getting attacked physically. How are they doing that? How is that? Because if that was to happen here through means of a cyber attack, we wouldn't have lights. It would be more than a couple hours that we didn't have power,
Exactly.
right? Whereas
Yeah.
down there, they're actually able to get it back going. How is that? What are the differences there?
So that's a damn good point, because you're touching on one of the things that's actually the flip side of the coin when we're having this high degree of digitalization. I mean, we've built a society that's very technology driven, and that means that we're slowly getting rid of a lot of manual resources in and around our different types of facilities carrying especially the energy sector, so the electricity, and especially for the cases back in Ukraine in 15 and 16, what saved the day and actually made them recover so fast was that they still had a lot of what do you call them, technicians being able to drive out to the substations, manually switching relays and levers. But we don't have that here in the northern countries and in Western Europe, at least not to the degree that we had in the future and comparable to Ukraine. So we will be challenged because we will have fewer people that are part of that recovery phase, because people also losing sight of how is this system actually working manually. And a lot of the time, what will save the day is that we can, go into island mode and run manual, but fewer and fewer of our resources actually know how to do that. And we will also have fewer resources. So spanning a whole country, that would be a serious incident, because we would spend some time recovering systems. And since it's all based on IT, which is then not available, that will be a challenge. So, of course, we save resources on a daily basis, but when push comes to shove, I think we will be challenged on that part, and it will be a challenge. So that's also some of the things that companies and government needs to focus on. How do we actually plan for these incidents, and how do we prepare to actually run manual and in island modes?
Right. Because I know that the infamous cloud has had is a big trend going on in these sort of environments. But is there any chance that we actually just say, you know what, maybe we shouldn't digitalize, maybe we should go back to these sort of just due to the examples that we're seeing now, that it actually has a big enough influence on us and our paranoidity, or whatever, how do you say that, to actually go back to doing it the old way? Or
well, I'm pretty certain that we cannot prevent the development of the cloud. And I mean, that's what brought the society to the marvelous things that we can do today. That's our curiosity and our need to always expand and improve our businesses. So in that sense, cloud is here to stay, and it will move into also the OT space. It will be slower, however. I think it's a way to see whether an OT cybersecurity practitioner is actually coming from an engineering background or not, because if he says absolutely and categorical no to cloud, he's probably an engineer who had spent time, being dirty and knows the challenges of not being able to control your old equipment. And let's face it, putting stuff in the cloud might have a lot of benefits, but the biggest challenge is that that's other people's computers, and so other people are in control, and you have no security for. And this is not cybersecurity sense, but just in general, that you're in control over your systems and your processes if it's run outside of your physical realm. So I think it's going to be a challenge to implement the upsides of the cloud environment, but it will slowly come. Right now, we are seeing a lot of IoT stuff being used in part of manufacturing and part of the OT ICS world, mainly for optimizational purposes, collecting all kinds of sensory inputs for maintenance purposes and optimization purposes, chasing the golden badges and all that stuff. So it's not as much the control systems and the control loops themselves, but unfortunately, I think at some point, sales and marketing will be able to convince the business owners and the process owner to venture into that land. Although it's something that I actually fear still. I need to see the technology be a lot better than it is today. But I mean, there are good sides there as well, right? Because if you look at digital twins, that's definitely, one way to do it, right? So you copy whatever you have, again, like the virtual labs I was referring to for pentest. So you can have digital twins, and then you can do a lot of stuff on the twin in the cloud. And since you have all these computing resources in the cloud, well, that's of course a good thing. But again, if the cybersecurity is not in place, you will also lose probably a lot of your intellectual property up there. So as always, be very cautious when you're taking these giants leap for mankind, because you can get burned up there.
Right. So crystal ball question, when, and hopefully soon, the conflict is over, do you think that we will start seeing more than we're seeing today in 2022? Because at least from our side, from what I hear from my colleagues, we are doing less incident response this year than we normally do, which is good. But I've also heard from somebody that once this conflict is over, there's a lot of groups that have time to go back to their business as usual. What do you think?
Well, that's one perspective, that they're right now focused on the kinetic part. Some of them might be directly involved. The other thing that I see analysts pointing at around the world is that it might also be a possible scenario that, we all know that it's not running as smoothly as they would prefer for the Russians. And they're also now starting to lose on the kinetic side. And that might mean that they would start to venture back into the cybersecurity side of it and the cyber warfare, and maybe start to be even more aggressive, since they didn't achieve what they thought they would with the kinetic warfare. We might see them raise the bar again on the cyber side, as we expected but didn't see. So I think it's either of those two scenarios that are more likely. But yeah, it's a little bit about looking into the fortune cookies here. It's hard to really tell what happens. I think I've seen that at least the Ukrainians are offering to share the knowledge they have, because they have some serious good experience from the last 8 years of protecting their critical infrastructure. So as a common effort, I think we can protect ourselves, and I also think that we are ready to some extent. But if they turn up the heat on us, we need definitely to focus on that, and then we will see more incident response, of course, coming out of that. But I sincerely hope not.
Yeah. Me neither. Mr. Weng, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your point of views with us. We appreciate it, and we appreciate all the work you're doing to keep the lights on. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend. Bye.
Take care.